So good morning, my name's Ryan Conway. I'm the program director for Interweave, which is, as we say, an initiative of the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, essentially to say that Interweave is a program that McConnell put together to help community sector organizations, nonprofits, charities, community groups, collaboratives, et cetera, use different social innovation tools as a means of enhancing their impact. And one of the tools, I think the one that we're going to chat a little bit about today in the context of improving LIP operations and RIF operations, is this idea of collective impact. We're also going to see that a lot of other things kind of intersect with that, of course, in the complex environments that people work in. So, when we say what Interweave does above and beyond everything else. We clarify and align for impact, or we help organizations and collaboratives do this. We do this through a couple of different support mechanisms, our impact and strategic clarity work, our collective impact work, which we're very happy to have been working on with Nora for the last couple of years, and some other dedicated initiatives relating to seniors and youth and things like that that use those ideas. About a couple months ago, Interweave, in partnership with some support from IRCC, was able to launch a new dedicated line to support LIPs, RIFs, and other organizations working with newcomers in Canada to use some of these approaches themselves. So in the last couple of weeks, I'm betting a few people in the room have probably been on the phone with Interweave or have been on one of our webinars. Show of hands. Hey, it's nice. Wow. Nice to see everybody in person. So when we're talking about collective impact, which is this idea that a lot of people in the room have already heard me talk about before, we're talking about helping organizations come together in a collaborative fashion to create a large-scale change that they couldn't be creating if they were working in isolation. Or essentially, we're saying a population-level change. And if we're talking about the newcomer space, then we're probably talking about population-level changes that are of particular importance to newcomers. So we could be talking about employment outcomes. We could be talking about education outcomes, or health, or other measures of integration, or welcoming communities. But the important piece is we're talking about it in an outcomes orientation, and we're talking about doing it in a collective fashion. So Interweave's been supporting collaboratives to do collective impact work for about 4 years now. And we've tried to distill down from all that work, which is now probably a few hundred collaboratives across Canada in different contexts. What are the really key things to be working on if you're talking about using a collective impact orientation to the work that you're doing? We say priority number one is the population level outcome goal. All right? Or if you've been on the phone with Interweave in the last couple of weeks, this is where we're thinking strategic clarity, right? What is it we're actually here to achieve? And that's a big question, right? It takes a lot of time and effort and collaborative energy to go into deciding what that's going to be and what you're able to achieve. But we certainly feel it to be the most important and the first step that you can take in using that collective impact approach. Priority number two, we say, is a clear model of the integrated efforts required to achieve those population level outcome goals. And here you're probably thinking about the languages of theory of change, or a shared theory of change, or a shared model, how you can come together as different organizations in different contexts and actually create that change. And as I'm sure Nora will tell you, that is also a challenging process, to put together a hypothesis of what that model can look like, and then to test it and validate it and iterate it and come out with many different versions of what you're actually going to be able to achieve, and really distilling down to what that secret sauce is that your organizations can do in order to create the change that you want to work on. And then there are other elements of collective impact that I'm sure people have heard about as you've been reading in the literature. Shared outcomes measurement, strong backbone coordination, continuous improvement in communication, all very important parts of CI that are there to support that model. I'm very quickly going to show you an example from outside of the newcomer space, from a collaborative that we've been working with in Kingston, where they're working on the issue of youth homelessness. So they came to Interweave through a program that we run with the Laidlaw Foundation, and they decided that they wanted to end youth homelessness in Kingston. And so over the course of a couple of years, they put together a statement of impact around what they could do and how they could reasonably measure that work. They came up with interconnected strategies for how they were going to address that and what the model was going to look like. And then they designed the outcome measures, they designed the backbone structures, and they designed the communication mechanisms in order to be able to support that work. I'm happy to speak in more detail about this in questions or if people want to chat with me during the break, but this is just an example from outside the newcomer space. So why is Interweave coming into the newcomer space? Well, we've seen that there's an ability to make strong impact and collective impact when you focus it in domains. We've done this in youth work, we've done this in work on senior social isolation. We're now very happy to have the opportunity to work with collaboratives that are supporting newcomers. I think there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of capacity, and a lot of fantastic infrastructure in the newcomer space, thanks to the LIPs and RIFs. I think having those there is a great foundation from which to create some really strong collective impact models. I think IRCC has got a fantastic willingness to learn and adapt and help organizations innovate. And just sort of coincidentally, through Interweave's normal collective impact work, we happen to work with this fantastic organization. A couple years ago, they called themselves something called a LIP. We didn't know what that was. And they were from the South Okanagan. So you get a chance to hear a little bit more about them, but you heard me say an integrated model of collective impact or a theory of change. Well, this is just a quick preview of what a really nice one looks like, and you're going to hear some more details of that from Nora. When we're talking about where you can be working in this space, as Interweave has been chatting with organizations over the last couple of weeks, we're talking about strategic clarity, we're talking about experimentation approaches that you can use to go on with that work, and we're talking about learning and adaptation. So as Interweave is working with community collaboratives like LIPS across the country over the next few weeks to support coaching engagements and workshops and things like that, other capacity building supports, those are the areas that we're going to be focusing on. Strategic clarity, obviously, is around articulating that intended impact and hypothesizing that theory of change. We like to say there's a challenge in the social sector. You can't do everything. Resources are limited. We all remember the slide that we were starting with where funding was front and center in people's minds. But Interweave likes to say that there's a good side to that, which is not everything is worth doing equally. And so in a constrained resource environment, if you're talking about wanting to have a very tangible impact, you can do that, even within this work. And having a clear strategy about how things fit together with the outcomes you want to achieve is a good step in starting that work. We like to say the intended impact is what you're going to achieve for whom and by when. Your theory of change, as you build that out, is how you're going to achieve that work. So there's a lot of I kind of don't want to say blood, sweat, and tears.
Sure, say it.
Yeah, blood, sweat, and tears. That goes into answering these questions. Simple as they may look, they're challenging things to think about, right? Anybody who's done a strategic planning process can tell you that, particularly for organizations that are in a complex collaborative partnership context, right? How do you distill down to these things and how do you get going? Interweave is also going to be supporting organizations with some experimentation-based tools, things like ethnography and user research and prototyping approaches and system thinking exercises, different things around that really help test the underlying assumptions of our work and see where we're going. And finally, there's developmental evaluation supports, helping you learn and adapt as you go and really make those refinements to your theory of change as you're coming through. So that's pretty much it for me. Very, very happy to talk during the break if anybody has questions around accessing supports from Interweave or what's available or anything like that. But suffice to say, we're here. We're here to help. I like to use the joke, we've been supported by the government and we're here to help. But trust us, we legitimately are. And we'd love to have the opportunity to work with some LIPs and some Réseaux in helping to create some new models of how impact can be achieved for the people that you're serving using collective approaches. So thank you.